Hey traders, my weekend video. Some little things that I'm looking at here. Okay, so basically, guys, these are my anchored VWATs based off of the Sunday opens for the past few weeks here. Okay, so we closed below last Sunday's anchored VWAP on the bearish side of trend into channel trend line support. Okay, going on SPY, going into next week. Historically, what we have going into the mid of December, uh, after an election year, the week after Thanksgiving, that tends to be tax loss selling week. Okay, so and that's exactly what we saw. We saw everything that was hitting 52-week lows go even worse. Okay, so what we saw a bunch of tax loss selling hitting the markets yesterday or last week, forcing prices lower on a lot of the worst parts of the market. And then the areas of the market that would have been really outperforming a lot of areas, they continued higher. Rotation back in the winners like Apple, Microsoft, uh, monies continue to flow back into those names. Okay, so uh, that's pretty much what we saw last week with breath being horrible. Okay, and breath was actually horrible. Now, if you go down 1 hour, some things I'm looking at real quick here. We're into that potential 2 week buy zone. So this is our 2 week area that we are looking for a potential buy zone. Okay, but if you zoom in here, what we saw the highest volume for Friday was net selling on the last 5 minutes. So on any one given candle, the highest volume, there was a big seller right into the close, down into this trend line uh, potential area going into next week. So, somebody was getting a little nervous going into the weekend, but technically we are still into the buy the dip zone. So, just be very mindful of that. But, just be mindful that, there was a net seller, right there at the close there Friday. Using my market webs right here. So basically, we're coming into Monday morning. If we stay below 604.30, we would be on the bearish side of Friday's inventory into major trend support. So if I was wanting to look for a relief rally in the S&Ps, I really want to see prices accepted above 604.30 on SPY. So be quite mindful of that. You know, uh, Technically, buy the dip is still the primary scenario. So let's definitely keep that on, especially in the bigger time frames. So, you know, you are bucking the trend if you're looking for the downside. Okay, guys, I like using volume profile. This is my weekly webs, so weekly time frame. To me, this looks like a potential completed bell curve from Friday. The prior week we had uh, the bell curve was not completed, so it looks like we did have a push up. And what really bothers me about going into next week, see this final push right here? This all happened on Friday. If you go down onto your smaller time frames, 5 minute, this looks like a weekly exhaustion high. So be very mindful of this going forward. That really bothers me whenever you see a rejection on a Friday going into the following week. Uh, so be very, very mindful of that scenario. Uh, that it looks like we might have buyer exhaustion in tech land. So I mean that's what I'm getting right here. So be quite mindful of that scenario. And if you go down on the 5 minute, zoom in here real quick. Uh, it wasn't no, it, we didn't have the same thing we had with SPY as far as the volumes. We didn't have a big seller there. But I'm just saying, based on volume profile, we might have a buyer exhaustion scenario there. Okay. Okay. This week the Fed's going to make a potential rate change, rate cut announcement. So there's a 97% probability going into Friday that we are going to get a quarter basis point cut. Um, that's what the markets are pricing in. Okay, a 97% chance. So be very mindful of that. Powell's really not done anything to uh, uh, do contrary to what the markets have predicted in the past. Typically a 97% probability means Powell is going to do it scenario. Okay, so we did come down into the target one. Okay, potential buy zone here for the ZNs for amounts. The bonds coming down is completely opposite of what you would expect for a rate cut scenario. So the bonds are telling us one thing that's completely opposite of what the probabilities are telling us of a rate cut. So what we're wanting to look for early on this week is to see buyers step up and defend uh, uh, prices on the Z end and drive down the yields. Okay, and historically, IWM outperforms the latter part of December every year. Okay, and we just went through the tax law selling week, which should have concluded Friday. And if in that scenario, we should start seeing an outperform in the uh, financials the rest of the year. And if that's the case, the bond markets are likely to rally uh, to uh, to bring down the yields in that scenario. So definitely something I'm looking for. I do have a target 2 even lower here, and we haven't completely filled the gap either to the downside. So we had this gap up. We haven't filled that gap. We did this move down on considerably below average volume. So I don't ever want to be short uh, a dull market. Okay, and in my opinion, this break here could very easily be completely wiped out in as early as Monday's session. This 1 day sell off because of the low volume there. So be very mindful of that scenario going forward. Some things I'm looking at here. IWM, we're back inside of the November trading range. But if you put some fibs on there real quick, guys, I want guys and gals, I'm sorry. You just put your fibs on here real quick. Based off the November open, November close, you can see right here, this is typically where you would be looking to buy the dip in a bullish continuation scenario. So we've done a 40% back test of last month's trading range. This is where you would generally be looking for buy the dip. Uh, so you be very mindful of that. As far as your fibs go, uh, this is right where same area right here. That's where this hammer candle took off to the moon right from that point. Potential buy the dip. And if you put your market webs on here, you see how the volume, uh, this right here is a bell curve. This is a potential support area right here on that. How about the 2 hour? See if that's giving me any clarity there. So just be very mindful of this scenario. This could potentially be buy the dip on the IWM going into this week if they come in here and save the bond market. So we do have a gap below us here on IWM, and IWM does like filling the gaps. Okay, uh, so we have to be mindful of that scenario as well. Uh, but technically, we are supposed to be going into a period of time where they're going to come in and support the financials. But the bond markets are definitely giving us some big concern, a warning us of something happening that the rest of the market's not really dialing into. Okay, and now if you put your RSP on here real quick, that's your equal weight S&P 500. I had this drawn out better. Sorry. Give me 1 second here. So guys, RSP, your equal weight S&P 500. So we've came back down into major support here. If you anchor your a regression line from the lows here to this higher low right here, this is where your regression line falls, and we came right down and we back tested it as of Friday close. This is a potential bounce point here on the RSP. That's your equal weight of the S&P 500. Okay. Now these fibs that I've got on here are based off of November's uh, open versus close. Okay. And that's also the 50% retrace of November's trading range. So there's two good reasons to think that the equal weight of the S&P 500s could find some buyers early on next week. So, we don't want to be making, substantial new lower lows out of the gate there first of next week. But this is definitely something that I'd be looking at as a potential buy the dip scenario still here in the markets. Okay, guys, the stock that had some of the highest volume there Friday was NVDA. And what I want to point out here is giving us a little red flag in the markets. The the last 10 minutes, the NVIDIA had some of the highest sell side action of the day, had the highest sell side action of the day of any 10-minute time frame. And this doesn't fall hand in hand with just merely tax loss selling in the markets. Something's going on with NVIDIA that's different than that scenario that we're just seeing some tax loss selling in the markets. So this has given us a big warning that what happened last week may be a lot. There might be a lot more to that than just mere tax loss selling. Now, so we definitely got to keep NVIDIA. This is going to be a top watch for next week. Okay. If you look at your market webs real quick here, okay, we ended up closing right, despite that high in the day volume, we closed right at the daily point of control. Okay, so be mindful of that. So basically, no real extremes on the closing print, despite having that in the day sell off, in the day that last 10-minute sell down. Okay, so uh, uh, be mindful of that. Now on the weekly here, we're at the extreme lower edges on the weekly time frame, so we definitely got to be mindful of that. Um, you know, like I said, we had the highest volume of the day was selling into the close. I mean, this would suggest buy the dip, but knowing that the highest volume of the day was on the sell side, this is looking more and more like a continuation pattern to the downside, potentially breaking support, opening the door for down here around the 116.50. 116.50 could be very much in the cards for next week. So we definitely gotta keep that watched, and NVIDIA might be breaking critical supports early on next week. Okay, guys, so the last 20 minutes, Tesla, that's our second most active there, the mega caps. Uh, and the last 20 minutes was pretty much all buying, okay? All buying hit the markets on Tesla. So with the last 20 minutes a day, we pushed up into a potential higher trading range here on Tesla. If you put your market webs on here, okay, you see how the volume profile just drops off that last 20 minutes. See how we had high volume, but we didn't have much time spent at that higher price point. Okay, we came up here into a potential exhaustion high. If you go over here on your 1 hour market, let me find it there. See how the volume profile just kind of comes to an end there. This could be like this here. This was an exhaustion high here, okay, which we saw some pullback. There is the potential uh, for an exhaustion high here. See how it just dropped off the cliff there? This is a potential for an exhaustion high. Okay, we see that green line right there? Go out here on the daily. See this channel I got down here? I have to go bigger time frame. Let's go weekly. Okay, guys. So what we got going on here? This push up right here, it came right into this uh, potential channel high right here. That's where we pushed up into that. In the last 20 minutes, we tried to push out and above that. So be very mindful of that. All we have is the last 20 minutes trying to push out and above this channel high. So be very mindful of that scenario going into next week. Okay, and then we have 2 hour. And then this here is our primary regression. So, we would really want to see if you're going to turn, you still got a long ways to come back down. We could very easily see a reset tomorrow, next week, even if you come down, say 9 o'clock, you got all the way down to 427 and it's still a bullish pattern. Okay. So, technically all the way down to 419. Okay. So you've really got all the way down to 419. It's still potentially a bullish pattern. Okay. But, the trend is still intact above 427. So we have to be mindful of that scenario. This is just, spitballing some things that I'm looking at here that they might have gotten a little too ahead of themselves here at this price point, and that they may want to take some profits off the table early on next week in Tesla. We'll see how it opens up. Okay, AMD is the third biggest on my list. We are into a potential support. If we come in Monday morning gapping down, I want to be bearish. Okay, if we were to come in Monday morning on AMD losing support, I would want to be bearish. Um, Very critical support area here for AMD. Gotta see if that can hold or not. Technically, I don't really want to be a net buyer here, but this is a very critical area for AMD. Financials potentially buy the dip. As long as you don't take out Friday's lows, it's typically, you would be looking to buy the dip here. So just be mindful of that. Our Apple, the weekly volume profile suggests to us that there are a lot of sellers here above the 248. So be very mindful of that. It does suggest a lot of selling pressure above 248 here on Apple so far. And we have to be very mindful of that, taking that forward. Um, so just heads up on that. That could be a very difficult thing to get through next week. Okay. So guys, I had a lot of charts drawn out really good before I started my video, and Thinkorswim didn't save my charts. It looks to me like there's a really good odds that Google's going to come down and do a hard back test of that trend line again. So let's be very mindful of that first thing next week. See, it looks like some weak hands up here in the Google space. So be very mindful. It's one of the last ones to rally here. Okay, so if what we're seeing in a potential exhaustion high in Techland does play out here, then Google might be one of the first ones to fade here. So be very mindful of that. So be sure to like me below here on my YouTube channel. I appreciate any comments below here on the YouTube channel. My handle is going to be 9662C on Twitter. And if you get a chance, please retweet me over there. I really appreciate it. And, hopefully this will help you guys out. Some things I'm looking at in the markets. We really got to keep a close eye on these bonds. Typically, the bonds are the boss of the markets. And for some time now, the bonds have been warning us of problems. So we've got to be very vigilant and very aware of that situation. Okay. So be very mindful of that situation. Thanks a lot.